G'day guys, Max here from Evidence-Based Football Manager. This is part 4 of my Football Manager training analysis video series. Today we're going to talk about how training intensity and the number of training sessions held in a week can influence player growth in Football Manager. Just to clarify that all the experiments shown in this video were conducted using the game version 22.3. So just a quick recap on how I've set up these experiments. So I'm in charge of Leeds United, and I use the game editor to create 25 clone players with a CA rating of 100 and a PA rating of 200. So these 25 players are subdivided into 5 different age groups, 15, 18, 21, 24, and 27, and they all have 10 out of 20 values for determination, professionalism, and ambition. The reason I've set up these 3 values as 10 out of 20 is because these are, 3 attributes in the game that can accelerate player growth in Football Manager. And if I set these values too high, like 20 out of 20, then all these players will start developing way too fast. And it can actually mask the effects from the other variables like training intensity or, the attributes of the staff members. So 10 out of 20, I reckon, is sort of like an appropriate middle value that allows the other variables to show their effects in terms of how much they influence player growth. I've set up a custom league where there are no matches played throughout an entire season. This is just to prevent the effects of match experience from influencing our test results. So whatever growth that we observe from these players will be purely from training and not from any match experience. So first of all, we're going to set up a control group. So if I go into the training page here, I've set up a very generic looking training schedule that consists of 5 overall and 5 outfield sessions. I chose overall and outfield sessions for this training schedule because these sessions involve all players in the team, including the goalkeepers. And 10 training sessions in 1 week, I reckon, is sort of like a nice average sort of amount of training for these players. And if I go into this page here, you can see the training intensity. So this is the default training intensity that's set by the game, which is so no training when the players are completely fatigued, followed by half intensity, normal, and normal intensity. So what I do is I go on a holiday for an entire season, and when I come back from the holiday at the end of the season, on the 30th of April the next year, I go into the squad page, and you can see that the CA ratings of these players have all grown by various amounts. So what I do is I record these final CA values into an Excel spreadsheet, and yeah, there we go. We have the data for the control group. For example, so for players aged 18, I have 5 players here. And this guy here, who's a striker, he grew by 10 CA points throughout the season. And this next player, who is a midfielder, he grew by 9 CA points throughout the season. By the way, I've conducted the same exact simulation 3 times. That's why I have 3 sets of data for each of these players. Now you can see that the player growth occurs mainly for players aged 15 and 18. For players 21 and above, there's really no growth that occurs, as you can see here. So what I'm going to do for the rest of this video is to focus mainly on players aged 15 and 18. So if I calculate the average amount of growth in CA for these players aged 15 and 18, it's 4.7. Meaning that these players, aged 15 and 18, they grew by 4.7 CA points on average through the course of a season. Next, what I'll do is I'll try lowering the training intensity for these players. So I'm going to go back to the training page in the game, and I will try changing the training intensity to no training, and half training when the players are fully fit. I don't change anything else apart from the intensity. So again, I go on a holiday with these settings, and I repeat the exact same process 3 times. And at the end of each simulation, I record the final CA ratings of the 25 players. After that, I tried increasing the training intensity. So I go back to the training page and I set the intensity as no training, half intensity, double intensity, double intensity, and double intensity. So now the players only get to have a bit of a rest when they are massively fatigued. Otherwise, they're asked to train really hard for the entire season. So just like before, I go on a holiday with these settings, and at the end of the season, I record the growth in CA for these players, when I come back from the holiday. All right, let's have a look at the results together. I've turned the results into a bar graph to make it easier for us to compare the results. So when training intensity was lower, remember this is when I turned down the training intensity to almost zero. The average growth in CA was 3.5, which is slightly lower than the control group that had an average growth of 4.7. And when training intensity was higher, remember this is when I cranked up the training intensity, the average growth in CA was 4.7, which is exactly the same as the control group. So based on these results, it seems that training intensity doesn't really affect player growth that much. I know between these two bars there is a difference of 1.2, but I think that's not really that significant. Now, in my last video, some people have commented that I should be doing t-tests for my experiments in order to figure out whether the results that I get from my experiments, whether they are statistically significant or are they just from like random luck. Now, I'm not a statistician, so I did have to take a crash course on YouTube on how to perform t-tests in Excel. So let's have a look at what I've got. So between the two samples for this bar and this bar, the t-score that I got was 0.06. And between this bar and this bar, the t-score that I got was 0.48. The settings that I used for these t-tests were one tail, two sample equal variance. Look, to be completely honest, I don't know if I use the right settings for these t-tests. But if there are any statisticians out there watching this video, please let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to make any adjustments to these t-tests. Okay, let's talk about the number of training sessions held per week. So this time I leave training intensity alone and I will either reduce or increase the number of training sessions that are held every week for these 25 clone players. So what I do is I go into the training page and you can see that I've gotten rid of all training, which means that my players will not be doing any training whatsoever for an entire season. Then I go on a holiday, same as before. And when I return from the holiday, I record how much the players have grown throughout the season. Once I've done that, I try overloading the amount of training. So you can see here, I made a training schedule that contains 18 sessions per week. So this schedule will really make my players work really hard throughout the entire season. And then just like before, I go on a holiday and at the end of the season, I record the results into an Excel spreadsheet. All right, let's have a look at the results. So again, I have a bar graph here to compare the three different scenarios. So when these players were doing no training, they grew by 1.3 CA points on average, which is a lot lower than the control value of 4.7. The t-score between these two experiments is 0. Again, I'm using the one tail, two sample equal variance settings. When the players were doing 18 training sessions in a week, they grew by 6.1 CA points on average throughout the season, which is slightly higher than the control value of 4.7. Here, between these two experiments, the t-score was 0.05. So here, it does seem that the number of training sessions held in a week does have a bit of an effect on player growth. So when players train more, they'll grow a bit more, and when players train less, they will grow a bit less. Now, I did want to verify the results that I got using a real in-game situation. So what I did was I set up a new game using Manchester United. So here you can see it's a brand new save in FM22 using Man United. And what I did was I go into the training page and you can see I've gotten rid of all the training sessions. So Manchester United players are not doing any training for an entire season. And I also went into the training intensity page and you can see I've turned down the training intensity. I guess the training intensity doesn't really matter anymore because since the players aren't doing any training sessions anyway. So I go on a holiday until the end of the season with these settings, and I recorded the growth of five young players in the Manchester United squad. So that's Mason Greenwood, Jadon Sancho, Diogo Dalot, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and Marcus Rashford. So as you can see, I've recorded the final CA ratings of these five players in Excel in an Excel spreadsheet, and I've repeated the same exact simulation 5 times, just so that I could collect a big enough sample size. After I've done that, I go back to the start of the season for Manchester United, and this time I increased the volume of training. So here you can see that I'm using the training schedule that has 18 sessions in 1 week. And if I go into the intensity page here, you can see that the training intensity has been turned up. So with these settings, again, I go on a holiday for an entire season and I repeat that 5 times. And at the end of each season, I recorded the final CA of the same five players, Greenwood, Sancho, Dalot, Wan-Bissaka, and Rashford. Okay, let's have a look at the results together. So when these five players were doing zero training for during the season, they grew by minus 0.5 CA points on average throughout the season. There is a reason for this negative growth in CA. So if you have a look at the detailed breakdown of the data, so with the first three players, Greenwood, Sancho, and Dalot, they showed a little bit of growth in CA, but with Wan-Bissaka and Rashford, their CA points actually deteriorated throughout the season. This is because Greenwood, Sancho, and Dalot are below the age of 23, whereas Wan-Bissaka and Rashford are 23 years old at the start of the season for Manchester United. In Football Manager, players aged 23 or above will deteriorate if they don't do any training. This is something that I've already proven in part 1 of this Football Manager training analysis series, so do check out that video for more details on that. So in this experiment, right, because Wan-Bissaka and Rashford showed negative CA growth, they've sort of pulled down the average amount of growth of these five players, resulting in this value of negative 0.5. On the other hand, when the players were put on a heavy training schedule, they grew by 5 CA points on average throughout the season. So if you have a look at the breakdown of the data, Greenwood, Sancho, and Dalot showed a good amount of growth. Wan-Bissaka more or less stayed the same, and Rashford showed a little bit of growth. So here the overall average growth is 5 CA points, which is a lot higher than the previous value of minus 0.5. And the t-score for between these two samples is 0. So all in all, I guess these results that you see here for Manchester United do concur with the findings that I've shown you before, which is that the number of training sessions per week can affect a player growth in Football Manager. So if you want your players to grow faster, make sure to add some extra training sessions for your team. However, there is one question that needs answering. If you turn up the training intensity for your players too much, will it increase the amount of injuries and end up hampering the amount of growth for your players? Let's find out. So let me go back to one of the previous experiments where the players were doing zero training during the season. So at the end of the season, when the simulation ends, what you can do is you go into the medical center page here, and if you have a look here, it tells you the amount of injuries that your players sustained throughout the season. So this is when the players did zero training for the entire season, and you can see that there's really negligible amounts of injuries, caused to these players. So let's compare this with another experiment. So this one is when the players were doing 18 training sessions per week with a very high training intensity. So here at the end of the season, if I go into the medical center, you can see that there are heaps more injuries that happen to my players. So if you get your players to train harder, by adding on some extra training sessions in a week, they will definitely grow more. But at the same time, they will become more likely to be injured a bit more. So it is important to pick the right balance of training for your team. And especially if you're managing a top tier club where you have to play 2 games in a week, do consider sort of temporarily lowering the amount of training for your team so that your players can avoid picking up too many injuries. Okay guys, that's it for today's video. Do you agree with what I talked about today? Please leave a comment to let me know. As always, please leave a like on this video. Every like that I get motivates me to make more videos like these, and it really keeps me going. Okay guys, I'll see you next time.